How do you know when it's time to replace your running shoes? Well, in general, mileage is a good indicator, but it's not the only one. So you should learn to recognize the sort of wear and tear in your shoes, but more importantly, how degradation feels and when the shoe tells you that it's time to replace it. So in general, you should track your mileage. Nowadays, all sport watches like Garmin, Coros and all the brands do have the ability to track the amount of kilometers that you run in each of your shoes, or rather said, that's done on the app on your phone, and also some generic apps like Strava. So make sure you have that properly configured, and if you have not, please go now and do so. Now, what's the normal lifetime for a running shoe? It's not enough to know how much you run in your shoes. The general rule of thumb is that you should replace your shoes at around 600 kilometers, but that depends on many factors, like obviously your weight, but also your running style, your stride, the amount of force you put on the impact on every step, whether you're shuffling or like dragging your feet, the type of surface you run on, and of course the type of shoe. What typically happens is that the shoe starts to degrade at around 400 kilometers and then progressively starts getting worse and sort of dies at 600. So that's roughly when you should change them. But that doesn't mean at 600 they're completely broken down and falling apart. So it's easy to think that they're still okay. And conversely, it's also possible that they start to degrade earlier, and because they have not reached that sort of mark, you think they're still okay, you continue running in them, but they're not okay, and then you might end up being injured. So it's important to learn to recognize when your shoes are asking for being replaced. So in general, what you start to see when a shoe starts to degrade is in terms of the upper, perhaps some scratches, some holes, some deformation even, like you can see this is kind of losing its form. You can see also very often some holes in the fabric here in the heel cup, because there is a lot of rubbing here. Also typically the tongue, at the place where the tongue unifies with the rest of the upper, or let's say the gusset. This is typically a place where it tears down. Also very often you see some bits of the outsole that have peeled off or completely disappeared, like you can see in this old pair of Vaporfly. There used to be pads of outsole here that have disappeared. Yeah, let me show you a newer pair of Vaporflies. You can see there are some pads here of outsole, and this is completely gone here. Also very typical, you will see some wrinkles start to appear in the midsole. Like you can see wrinkles here, there, quite prominent. All these wrinkles here are due to the usage of the shoe, and that means the foam is not that responsive anymore. It's losing part of its characteristics and properties. Sometimes you can even see sort of the shape of your foot like imprinted in the insole, meaning that the insole has lost its elasticity and its cushioning. Also sometimes you'll notice that the insole has moved around a little bit, it's not in its original place. Sometimes you will see that the laces have worn down a little bit, or that this bit here that's called aglet has disappeared. But in general you should look for signals like when you start to feel a loss of properties of the shoes, like in terms of responsiveness or bounciness, comfort, like the shoe becomes stiffer, you start feeling more and more the contact with the ground, it starts being uncomfortable, you start feeling that the shoe is not really helping you anymore, it's not fun anymore. Now notice that the real reason to replace a shoe is a change or a loss in its running properties. It's not really about wear and tear in the upper or losing the aglets or even some parts of the outsole peeling off. That does not prevent you from running, but it's more about the bounciness of the foam and how it feels on your feet and how you feel it's helping you. So let's say in general the visible part of the wear and tear is just some cues that are telling you that yes, the shoe is getting old, but the real reason is what you should feel internally. Now it's tricky because changes in characteristics of the foam and so on are typically happening progressively over time, and they're not very easily noticeable if you don't pay a lot of attention or if you don't have another pair of shoe to compare directly with. Although sometimes the change is sudden and brutal because, I don't know, something is sort of broken, or because some element of the shoe has reached some kind of threshold where it starts to degrade very rapidly. but in general it's more progressive. So I'd like to show you some examples, but unfortunately I have donated most of my shoes after using them for running, so I don't have most of them here. But I remember my first pair of running shoes was the Asics Nimbus Gel, whatever version it was. The issue with that shoe is that the gel became sort of solid and lost its property at around 500 kilometers. So I had to replace them at 600. The Nike Invisible 2 that many people liked and say it was very durable. Well, for me, it completely fell apart after 300-400 kilometers. The upper started to detach from the midsole, like literally, actually in this part here. Also, it had lots of wrinkles. The foam was not responsive. It was very uncomfortable to run in. It was hurting my feet. So yeah, I still held them until like 500, but then that was it. The Nike Pegasus Turbo was an excellent shoe, but it became sort of unsupportive, I would say, after 600 kilometers. I had two pairs of Nike Air Zoom Tempo Plus or something like that, I think it was called. There was a shoe with similar to the Alpha Fly, so there was a pod in them, no carbon plate though, so it was a training shoe. And what happened is that the pod here, pretty much like the gel in the Asics, started to lose its property after around 500 kilometers and was not bouncy anymore. So yeah, they lasted around 600 and that was it. The Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 was an excellent shoe, very versatile shoe, but I noticed after like 500 kilometers they started to feel more, to feel stiffer, not fun to run in anymore, not really helping me. So yeah, I still continued running until I believe 750 something. Because, well, they didn't show any apparent sign of degradation, but yeah, it was just not fun anymore. And I had several pairs of Asics Nova Blast 2 and 3. Yeah, pretty good, not much degradation either. But yeah, after like 600 kilometers-ish, they were losing their responsiveness. They felt heavy and not really helpful anymore. And a special mention for carbon-plated racing shoes. I had the Vaporfly 2 and 3s. I have two pairs of Vaporfly 3s here. Now more or less after 500, not even that, after 400 kilometers, they felt like they were not helping me run anymore. They were very stiff, like I can feel the ground too much. They were hard on my legs, on my calves, on my muscles, on my Achilles tendon. The Vaporfly so far are working as expected, noticeably better than my old pair. My old pair of Vaporfly is now above 500, 520 I believe Ks, and they make a strange noise. They feel pretty flat and not helping me anymore. So yeah, these ones, yeah, they feel new, but still no miracle. The Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro, actually at 550 kilometers or so, they don't show any sign of wear and tear, really. The shoe is still perfect, it's still very comfortable, but eventually I stopped using it for various reasons that I explain in the video. I'll put a link there, so you can go and watch it. I have a pair of Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus in the cupboards. I have not even reached 300 Ks in them yet, although these are relatively old shoes, because I don't run well in them. So that happens sometimes. You buy a pair of shoes and they are just not good for you, and well, yeah, then you don't reach the end of life of the shoe. The Nike Alpha Fly 1 was an excellent shoe, but what happened with them is that at about 400 kilometers, if I remember well, something strange happened. All of a sudden, something, I believe, broke down, although I did not notice it at the time. They started to make a strange noise, and the feeling on the ground was kind of not good, and I could feel a difference between my right and left foot. But I was stubborn at the time, and I thought, yeah, 400 is not enough. I shall use the shoes for until 600, because, you know, they are expensive shoes, so I can still use them for workouts. And I did so, but I eventually picked up an injury in my glute med muscle, so that was really not a good idea. So when you start noticing signs that your shoes are asking for a change, let's say around 500 kilometers, then you should start to think about what other new shoe to buy. So start investigating, watching shoe reviews, asking around, trying shoes in different shops if you can. But bear in mind, this process will take time, so don't wait until your shoes are completely falling apart and you might even pick up an injury. So let's say after 500 kilometers, you can still use the shoes for arguably 100, 150 kilometers, probably for easier runs or lighter sessions. So that gives you maybe a few weeks or a couple of months of margin to go and find a new one. So use this time to investigate, but don't wait until it's too late. And what shoe should you buy then? Well, there's always the option to buy the same shoe again. Chances are that you might get a good discount because there's probably a new version out on the market, so you might get the old one discounted, so that's good to take into account. But on the other hand, it's always good to try new shoes, so yeah, it's up to you. So what can you do when the shoe's lifetime is over? Well, you have several options. First of all, you can just keep them as a souvenir, especially if you have a special connection with a particular pair of shoes, perhaps because you had a PB in them or whatever, or they got signed by someone. But secondly, you can also use them as casual shoes for walking, working, whatever. Normally, even though the shoes may have lost their properties, like the bounciness of the foam for running, they're still very much okay for casual wear. However, bear in mind that this only applies to non-plated racing shoes, because racing shoes with a plate in them are typically very uncomfortable to walk. Like, well, this one more or less, but a shoe like that is difficult to wear like every day. It's not stable, it's bulky. A shoe like that with the pod, and it's just very uncomfortable to walk in. In fact, it's even uncomfortable to warm up in. And also consider that most running shoes have a very flashy design and colors and a big stack of foam, like here, or even this one is more normal, has no carbon plate in it, but a big stack of foam, conspicuous colors. Also, as running shoes, they're probably 2 to 3 sizes bigger than your normal shoes, because you need some space in the toe box. So they look big and bulky. And yeah, it's quite noticeable that they are running shoes. So if you're gonna wear them in casual circumstances, then that's perhaps something to take into account at the time of buying them. Now, thirdly, you can also donate the shoe to someone you know will actually use it, or perhaps a charity association that you know will actually make good use of it. And in fact, yeah, that's also compatible with wearing it yourself during a season, let's say, and then after that you can donate it. It's still gonna be okay. And fourthly, you can deposit the shoe in some special containers that are available in some cities for recycling of textile and shoes. Now, to be honest, I doubt that most of the shoes that get deposited there actually get to have a second life. I believe most of them end up in the trash, unfortunately. So yeah, I really wish that manufacturers would put in place a structure for collecting used running shoes and sort of recycle or recondition them. Pretty much like happens in other industries, like mobile phone, for example. That would be really great for sustainability, but I guess we're not there yet. And if you've got your running shoes and you want to learn how to run better, then I've got this video for you where I explain 4 running drills that are much more effective than the typical A skips and B skips.